Biggjimm. He is a friend for a long, long time, and he's got some great stories. We talk just about every week on the phone, and I really appreciate Jim very much. And he's very good at what he does when it comes to research and his sketches and drawing what witnesses describe to him. So I'm going to give this over to Jim. The food truck is Toy Hibachi. We get it all the time because we live in Bologna. It's got yum yum sauce, and I really like that stuff. And so it's good stuff. Yeah. Okay. All right, Jim. Here you go.
Well, thank you all for coming out. My name is Jim Whitehead, and I am a researcher with the MABRC, also a member of Robert's group, APES. I am based out of Oklahoma, and I function a little bit as our sketch artist, which is why Robert asked me to talk about this. So this is Sketching Sasquatch. And a little bit about me. I like to joke that's my natural habitat, just out in the swamps and the brush in the middle of nowhere. I am the Western State Director for the Mid-America Bigfoot Research Center. And again, I mentioned I'm a member of APES. I grew up in the Cross Timbers. I went to college, got educated, and got a degree or two. And they were in biology and natural science. And I have done some stuff, mostly while I was in college, with the Oklahoma Academy of Science and Oklahoma Biological Survey. Generally, this was stuff like species tallies, but I have done some legitimate science-y type things. And again, I kind of function as our group sketch artist. So, why do I want to do a Bigfoot sketch? Well, a person sees a Bigfoot, they a lot of times don't have a camera, they don't have anything to validate their sighting for them, even if it's just to themselves. They have nothing. So, the witnesses got this story, but they want something to kind of prove it. And a lot of times these witnesses have observed something, so we'll find out that maybe they've seen something we would like to know. They've observed a behavior we haven't seen. That's the thing about Bigfoot research. You always have the opportunity to learn something that nobody else on the planet knows. Okay, and I find that doing these sketches actually helps the witness. Again, a lot of these times after I've done the sketch, they're happy because they're like, I knew I wasn't crazy. This is it. This is what I saw. And a lot of times they're afraid to talk to people about it or mention it because they don't have anything, or they're afraid people are going to make fun of them. And it kind of gives them a little bit of a feeling of closure. So in the end, doing a sketch for a witness, I think, is a good thing. It helps them. Now, there are some things to consider about sketches. Artists have unique styles. An artist will put as much of themselves into a sketch as the witness will. And again, I just mentioned that here. It's reflective of both the artist and the witness. Okay. Now, over the years, there have been some really talented people, I'm not one of them, that have came forward and started doing this. Harvey Pratt is one that comes to mind. He is a forensic sketch artist that works with the Oklahoma OSBI, it's the State Forensics Lab Analyst thing. And when you look at his stuff, You can see that. A lot of his sketches tend to look like people in police lineups. Nothing against him, it's what he does. He's very good at his job. But you can tell when it's one of his drawings. Another one was Pete Travers. Pete Travers was a concept artist, well is, and he's done a lot of work for like Sony Pictures, doing stuff about Star Wars and stuff like that. And you look at his sketches, and they tend to look like concept art for a movie. Like this is going to be a character in a movie. And again, that's what Pete Travers does. But you can tell. Bill Rebsman, I may have mispronounced his last name. He is a traditional artist. He's done a lot of cryptozoological art, and he's done some stuff, and again, you can always tell his distinct style. This gentleman's kind of backed off. His name is Charles Middleton, and after a good friend of his passed away, he just kind of quit doing it. But he did a lot of Bigfoot eyewitness sketches too. And Salima Irwin is an art teacher from Texas that's done some. And yeah, every one of these artists, you can see a lot of their individual styles in these. Rob Roy Menzies is another artist. He's based out of Alaska. He's done quite a few. Now, the artist can make the difference. Sometimes the same witness will talk to multiple artists and get sketches done. And since each artist has their own individual style, the sketches can end up looking radically different, even though it's the same witness describing the same thing. And I also need to mention, and I'm going to talk a lot more in depth about this, that our memories kind of change a little over time. So a witness that said something 30 years earlier and did a sketch with an artist versus the sketch of the same creature today with a different artist may look like entirely different creatures. This is a great example of the same witness, different artist. And both of these are pretty well known because these are both book covers. Anybody know what books these are? Okay, the one on the left is from Fred Beck's account of the assault on Ape Canyon in 1924. And his son drew the cover of that based on what he saw for the book. Then he talked to Roger Patterson. A lot of people don't know this, but Roger Patterson, in addition to being the guy that filmed the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot, was a phenomenal artist. And a lot of the skeptics have tried to say he created the look of Bigfoot. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute too. But as you can see, these two sketches are very similar. Okay, this is another case of the same witness, different artist, and unfortunately I'm the witness. Back when I was a kid, something peeked in the window at me, and at the time I convinced myself it was a horrible dream. That or we had an 8-foot tall axe murderer wandering the woods. But I drew a very horrible sketch, but then I talked to Charles Middleton, who drew that. This is another case. Same witness, two different Bigfoot images, two different artists. They look different. This was Bobby Hamilton's, the founder of the GCBRO, and these both are supposed to be of the same creature he saw. Again, two different artists, and they both look very different. And this is an investigation with a witness that I interviewed. This particular witness was a law enforcement officer, so he's a trained observer. They had me do a sketch, and that's the full body image. Then they had a forensics artist that they knew draw the one that's the facial image. And again, since I'm not the forensics artist, our art looks different. Now, there is an innate problem with eyewitness sketches and their reliability. And how many of y'all have seen these cop shows out there where you'll see them interview one witness and they'll draw a sketch and they'll say, okay, this is the guy. That is complete garbage. And I'll tell you why. Please use composite sketches. If they get 4 or 5 witnesses that see the same guy and do a sketch, each witness is going to recall the guy looking different. So they'll take the sketches and look for the common features. The reason this is we all perceive things differently. And because of that, no sketch is definitive on its own. So I'm going to do a little fun experiment here. I'm going to show you guys an image. This image will last the average duration of a Bigfoot sighting. And I'm going to click off of it after this little time is over, and I want to ask y'all what you saw. You ready? Okay. What was that? That is the average amount of time a Bigfoot sighting lasts. Now, I have talked to witnesses that gave me all this information, all this detail, and I asked them, well, how long did the sighting last? Oh, about 3 seconds. Okay. Obviously, that kind of simulates what you would see driving down the road and you pass something. And that is one of the most common Bigfoot sighting encounters. So let's look at it again. I'll give you all more time. You just see a big dark blob. How about we light it up? Now, how many of y'all would have got all that detail in that little 3-second sighting? Now, this leads us into a real issue, filling in the gaps. We all have a box, and inside of that box is everything we know and everything we think we know. And if you see something weird, and your brain can't process it, it's going to try to fit it in that box, even if it don't fit. So, a lot of times, our mind will start filling in the holes in what we see. We didn't get any detail, but our subconscious is going to start plugging the gaps with stuff that we've seen. And a lot of times, popular culture can influence it. If what we expect to see could influence it. And a lot of times what we expect to see is derived from pop culture. So, I'm going to show exactly what I'm talking about here. Have y'all ever heard of a term called memory fluidity? It means over time our memories change. We might remember something and it was a good memory and it gets warmer and fuzzier and brighter, but that's not actually what happened because our brains are altering it. Whereas if we were terrified, the memory gets scarier and scarier the more we bring it up. So,
that happens. I got to push the button.
Oh, good. All right. But again, a lot of times our minds start kind of filling in gaps, the blank spots. So I'm going to show you some examples from pop culture and how they've affected eyewitness sketches. This shows an image that we will all recognize, then it shows images from Bigfoot witnesses that have had sketches done. Oops. I don't know what I did. Okay. All right, we've all seen this movie. Harry and the Hendersons, big movie, family film, but the thing is, after this movie came out, people started reporting Bigfoot looking like Harry. And if you think I'm joking, yeah, that's Harry. This one is from Texas. It's not as obvious, but you still see the hairy influence, the high forehead, balding, bit of a beard. And I mentioned memory fluidity, it changing over time. The next one's interesting. This witness actually saw Bigfoot 20 years before Harry and the Hendersons came out, but after the movie came out, their description changed, and they started describing the Bigfoot looking like that, where before it was just a big, tall, dark, hairy thing. And we go to the Chewbacca effect. We've all seen Chewbacca in Star Wars, and it's influenced sightings around the world. And this gets complicated further by the fact that Chewbacca suits are often used in Bigfoot hoaxes. There was a Bigfoot researcher that was talking about how, yeah, I seen a Bigfoot in Northern California and it looked just like Chewbacca. And it has a dark nose, and I'm kind of thinking that his buddies might have screwed with him with a Chewbacca suit. This is what got him into Bigfooting when he was there camping with his friends. Yeah, that's Chewbacca. Not quite as good, but that's still Chewbacca. And Chewbacca wasn't the only one guilty of this. The Wolfman left its mark. Came out in 1941. A lot of early Bigfoot sightings. They would draw the Wolfman. That's from the early 1970s in Pennsylvania. This one's more modern, but you can still see a little bit of the Wolfman in it. As can you with this one. So, again, this is clearly showing that they're drawing from what they've seen to fill in holes. And the last part of this, I got to talk about the Boggy Creek Monster and Ape Men. 1968, 2001, A Space Odyssey came out. Had very detailed ape suits for one of the first times in cinema history. And what's really interesting is I've done a lot of digging, and I cannot find a single sketch or a description of a Bigfoot with an ape-like nose prior to that film. Not a single one. Now, Legend of Boggy Creek came out, and you never got a good look at it, and the Bigfoot suddenly start getting reported as being more monstrous. They've all got hair hanging down all over everything. And that's partially because in that and in the sequel, Boggy Creek 2, they used very similar suits to A Space Odyssey. Another one was 1988's Missing Link. It was a British movie, and it had its fair share of imitations too. That's pretty close. And Legend of Boggy Creek, they start reporting Bigfoot looking like that. And when they get a more detailed look at the Boggy Creek monster, in the second film, they start reporting the Bigfoot looking like that. And this is the Missing Link movie. Yeah, this happens. But here's the thing. This is not intentional. The witnesses are not setting out to do this. This is a normal feature of our brains. This is how our brains work. So, we edit it, we're not aware we're editing our memories. So that being said, is there a way to get to what Bigfoot looks like without cultural contamination? There is. I call this section zeroing in. The way to do it is to look at stuff before Bigfoot became a household name. Stuff that was around in the 40s, 50s, prior to the Bluff Creek incident, prior to the Patterson-Gimlin film. Because, yeah, there might have been stories, but nobody had seen one. There hadn't been a lot of pictures of them, so nobody knew what they looked like. So there's more, trying to think of a good word to describe it, more credibility in what the witnesses were saying because there's not that contamination. And when you look at those, you can kind of look at features that will line up with modern accounts. So I've got some Bigfoot sketches that I found. These are early 20th century, again, made up before anybody had a mental image of what a Bigfoot looked like. And before I go into this, I have to make a quick note. We all know, you remember like when you get a box of Count Chocula, and you look at the vampire on the box, you notice how he's changed over time? Popular icons do this. Different artists, whatever. And a lot of icons and mascots that we know today might have had different origins. Case in point, this is the California Giant Produce Company. This is a label that they would put on their fruit crates. And it's depicting a hairy man, giant hairy man. The thing is, this company is still around today. And I guarantee you, every one of us has seen what this has been turned into. Anybody know what that company is? Ho, 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 in the valley of the Jolly Green Giant. It used to be a Bigfoot. Now, that being said, we all have the mental image of Paul Bunyan as this cartoonish giant lumberjack that ran around with a big blue ox. But here's the thing. Paul Bunyan, that image was actually created as a mascot for the Red River Logging Company in the 20s. That's where that imagery comes from. But when you talk to the loggers going as far back as the late 1800s, they were using it to describe wildman sightings. In the early 1900s, a folklorist sat down with a bunch of loggers and they started recording folklore. Now, what got really interesting is they were telling them things like, well, yeah, we've seen Paul Bunyan. He's so big he can't wear clothes. And since he can't wear clothes, he grew hair all over him, and you'll see his footprints down by the creek. And some of the loggers swore that they seen this name that they had assigned to it. Now, 1921, newspaper published an article about it, and they had an old logger that claimed to have seen Paul Bunyan. And he sat down with a sketch artist, and that is what they drew. Albert Ostman. This was the guy, prospector in British Columbia. He got picked up and carried off. And it's one of the famous Bigfoot stories. He tried to draw what he had seen. Later he talked to Roger Patterson, who drew the image on the right. And again, this is the Fred Beck encounter, the assault on Ape Canyon, with both the Patterson sketch and the sketch by Fred's son. And finally, William Rowe. He encountered one in 1954. And this is what he said he saw. Okay, now, there's another group of people I didn't talk about, the Native Americans. And there's often depictions in there. In fact, anthropologists have a whole classification of what they call humanoid masks, meaning they're depicting something other than a human that looks like us. And there's also petroglyphs and carvings and ledger art. Ledger art's where they would get a hold of notebooks and they would draw in them. So, again, the humanoid masks are widely believed by anthropologists to be mythical creatures, you know? And, however, when you talk to the tribes about what these masks are supposed to be, they'll say, you know, in the case of my own people, it would be Hatatlusichito. Well, that's the same word they use for Bigfoot in the tribal language. And this is just a couple of masks that have popped up over the years. The one on the left is from Alaska. The one on the right is from British Columbia, and you can see they have some very similar features. And this is, again, another Alaskan mask on the left, and the Cherokee mask on the right. And a much older Cherokee mask on the left, and a mask from British Columbia on the right. They all have some very interesting, similar features. And that's not the only thing. They've also uncovered, I guess, Bigfoot action figures made by Indians. They would make little dolls that representing Bigfoot. These were both dug up in the Alaskan permafrost. Wonderful for preserving stuff. Probably the most famous Bigfoot mask is the Sasket mask. This was made for a traditional tribal dancer that was presenting on Sasquatch Day in Harrison Hot Springs, British Columbia. And this costume mask, it disappeared for a long time. It was only recently found and reappropriated. This is a closer look. Kind of looks a lot like some of these other images I was just showing. Oop, too far. Okay, these are some rock carvings. I say rock carvings, that one from Alaska is actually carved out of whalebone. But again, we see some of the same features. The famous stone ape heads from Vancouver Island. It's kind of hard to explain how Indians would know what an ape looks like 1,000 years ago. New York, they've dug similar carvings up. And this is one that I really love. It is the Mayan god monkey down in the temples in Mexico, and they call it bats. So, I forgot I had some more stuff. We got ledger art. These are drawn by Native Americans. It also kind of, leader, the way they saw the world. Okay, this was David Cusack's Stone Giants of the Tuscarora tribe, drawn in the 1820s. He depicted giant hairy men chasing Indians. Probably a bit better for this is Chief Silverhorn's Copes of Pull from 1987. And Chief Silverhorn was a Kiowa in Oklahoma, and he actually claimed to have seen the Copes of Pull. So he was recounting this story in this painting from their folklore of the Copes of Pull stealing a person. But when you look at the Copes of Pull, the Bigfoot figure, it looks a lot like what I just showed everybody. So, now you gotta look for all of these common features. And then you can do a composite based on the data and look to see what it matches today's. Okay, now this at first glance may not look that similar. This is Roger Patterson versus the logger sighting. However, if you were to remove the long hair on the logger sighting and actually get to looking, heavy brow ridges, broad cheekbones, large jaw, wide flared nostrils, low forehead, that's actually pretty close. It's just one's shaggier than the other. This is, again, Roger Patterson, and I'm comparing it to the God Monkey. Same features. Wide, flared nostrils, high cheekbones, a little bit of prognathism, meaning the lower jaw sticks out a little, but it's quite large, brow ridges, deep-set eyes. Okay, how about the Sasket mask? Brow ridges, deep-set eyes, broad flared nose, prognathism. Chief Silverhorn. It's kind of hard to tell because it's blurred, but again, it's very similar. And finally, we'll compare this to Patty herself. Now, how about looking at some modern sightings here? This is one from New York. Broad flared nose, brow ridges, low forehead, large lower jaw. This is one from Oklahoma. Brow ridges, wide cheekbones, broad flared nose, big lower jaw, prognathism. These are features they all have in common with modern sightings. This is a good template for what a Bigfoot would probably look like if you had one in the flesh then. Because this is what everybody's reporting without the contamination. This is a composite sketch I'd done based on that criteria. This is another one I did a few years ago. This is basically what police artists do. They get good sketches from different witnesses, put them together to see what a suspect pretty much looks like. Now I need to talk a little bit about variation. Variation is natural within a species. Conid-like species often has a lot of subspecies and variants. For example, a black bear you find here in Arkansas does not look like a black bear from Alaska. This is a good example. These are chimpanzees. The bonobo is actually a different species, but the other three are the same species, even though they don't look alike. So in Bigfooting, we see some variation in the body types. You've got ones that have a more human look to them, the silhouette there. Still bulky, still big, but then you got the big chunky no necks. Now, these are some possibilities for that. Some of these ones that seem to have no neck, it could be hair hanging down, obscuring the shoulders. Could be two different species. The one I personally subscribe to is its brown fat storage. I'll explain that in just a second. Could just be muscle. Could be linked to diet. Maybe the scrawnier ones aren't eating as good. Could be a sex-linked characteristics. One could be female. Brown fat is typically stored in the winter months. It's very dense and hard when you touch it. It's not like the jiggly yellow fat. And most of your animals that hibernate build brown fat stores. They use it to survive. And it's often burnt along with yellow fat / white fat to make milk for lactating mammals. Now what's interesting, in humans, we don't have very much brown fat, but where we find it is in our neck, shoulders, and back. So every human on the planet today is not designed for a woodland environment. We are designed for a temperate, warm environment. That's why we don't have much brown fat. But what if something that was built like us was adapted for a colder environment, someplace with harsh winters? It makes sense it'd be storing brown fat. And it'd probably have a lot more than we would. Okay? So here is a witness sketch from British Columbia, and you see these huge, massive shoulders. And what I'm wondering is how much of that is actually brown fat reserves. You get some of these reports will say they're hunched over, no neck. And again, the brown fat is stored in that area on humans, what little we have. So if these things are storing it in the same place, they're probably going to look like that once they've stocked up for the winter. And maybe these more human-looking ones, these scrawnier-looking ones, have burnt through those reserves. Another thing to take into consideration is sexual dimorphism. Men and women come in different sizes, and male and female in different animals. Some of them are bigger. And chimps, the male is considerably larger than the female and a lot more muscular, a lot heavier. Same with gorillas. One little point of variation we see are the teeth. You seem to have two distinct groupings. People report them having big, blocky, horse-like teeth, and some people report them having canines. This is two different eyewitnesses. One, again, reported big, blocky, horse-like teeth, and the other one said they had canines. Could be sex-linked. Could be the males have larger canines. We see that in primates. It also could mean that there are two different kinds of them. We just don't know. The amount of facial hair varies. And it could be that just different groups of them have gene expressions going on. Kind of like you get in one area, let's say in Europe, like over in the Scandinavian Peninsula, you get a lot of people with blonde hair. Whereas over in Spain, you get a lot of people with dark hair. It's gene expression. This is normal. Could be just be individual variations. You can look at a single troop of chimpanzees and they all look different. Could be age-related, could be sex-related. Maybe the female Bigfoot aren't quite as heavily haired in the face as the males. We just don't know. This is kind of showing some of the facial hair variation you see in these sketches. You got some that don't have that much, and you got some that look like a woolly booger. Cranial hair length, your head hair. Again, gene expression, isolated groups. There may be a gene floating around for longer hair on the head. Then another one, it just simply could be individual variation. You know, this Bigfoot just has longer hair. That Bigfoot's bald. This kind of shows you what I'm talking about. You get two sketches from kind of the same region, and you'll see something like this. One's got long hair all over it, and the other one's got shorter hair. And this could, again, like I said, just be normal variation. Okay, regional variation. Different pockets. I'm almost done boring you guys half to death, I promise. The different pockets of populations within animals will often have variance within a region. These two were sketched in the same area, if I'm not mistaken, about 40 years apart. But we can do a little better than that. Bring back the one from Wisconsin. Now, a guy named Matt Wakely said he saw a Bigfoot in the same region 80 years later, and they're very similar. This could be a regional variant. It's not the same animal. Whatever the logger saw, I am sure is long gone. So in conclusion, eyewitness testimony cannot be declared definitive just due to how our minds work. But we can identify certain physical traits, some morphological similarities that allow us to find common features. And we can speculate based on that. We can't say definitively, we don't know. And thank y'all for listening. I'm sorry I bored you guys half to death.